The rifle shot cracked through the hot desert air, sending Delilah Blackburn scrambling for cover behind an overturned wagon. Her heart pounded in her chest as dust kicked up inches from her face. She had been on the run for 3 days now, and Marshall Garrett was gaining ground. The hem of her once fine blue dress was torn and caked with the red earth of the Arizona Territory, and her dark hair had come loose from its pins. The year was 1878, and Delilah had never felt more alone in her life. "Miss, get down lower." The voice came from her right, where a tall figure on horseback approached at a gallop. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, dropping beside her as another bullet splintered wood above their heads. Beneath a well-worn Stetson, Delilah caught sight of piercing blue eyes in a sun-bronzed face. "Noah Quinn," he introduced himself tersely, checking the ammunition in his Colt revolver. "Seems like you've made yourself an enemy." "You could say that," Delilah replied, flinching as another shot rang out. "He won't stop until I'm dead." Noah peered over the wagon, calculating the distance to the ridge where the shooter was positioned. "You got somewhere to go, miss." "Delilah." "Delilah Blackburn," she answered, her voice barely steady. "And no, I don't, not anymore." Noah nodded once, his expression grim but determined. "My camp's about 2 miles west. We make a run for it when he reloads." "You don't understand," Delilah protested, grabbing his arm. "He'll hunt us both down." The cowboy's face hardened into something dangerous and resolved. His eyes, like chips of blue ice, met hers without flinching. "Then let him try." The words hung between them for a heartbeat before Noah fired 3 quick shots toward the ridge, then grabbed Delilah's hand. "Now!" They sprinted toward his waiting horse, a magnificent chestnut quarter horse that stood steady despite the gunfire. Noah boosted Delilah up and swung himself into the saddle behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, and they thundered away from the ambush site, weaving through the scrubby terrain to make themselves a harder target. Delilah felt the solid warmth of him at her back, this stranger who had risked his life for her without question. The desert landscape blurred around them as they rode hard toward the setting sun. She had no choice but to trust him, a man she had known for less than 5 minutes with her life. The sound of pursuit faded behind them, but Noah didn't slow their pace until they had crossed a shallow river and climbed into a rocky area dotted with piñon pines. Only then did he ease the horse to a walk, allowing the animal to recover its breath. "Your camp?" Delilah asked, suddenly aware of how intimately they were pressed together on the saddle. "Just ahead," Noah replied, his breath warm against her ear. "It's not much, but it's out of sight." True to his word, they soon approached a small clearing tucked between rock formations. A simple camp was set up, a bedroll under a lean-to shelter, a stone-ringed fire pit, and supplies organized with military precision. Noah dismounted first, then reached up to help Delilah down. His hands were strong at her waist, steadying her when her legs wobbled from the long ride. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27, only a few years older than her own 22 years. "You're bleeding," he observed, nodding toward a tear in her sleeve where a bullet had grazed her. Delilah glanced down in surprise. In the rush of adrenaline, she hadn't even felt it. "It's nothing." "Sit," Noah insisted, guiding her to a flat rock before fetching a canteen and a small bundle of supplies. As he cleaned the wound with gentle hands, Delilah studied him. His movements were efficient, practiced. His clothing was worn but clean dark trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A man who lived rough but took pride in himself. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly. Noah's hands paused momentarily before continuing to wrap a strip of clean cloth around her arm. Where I come from, you don't leave someone to face guns alone, especially not a lady. I'm not much of a lady anymore, Delilah said bitterly. Something like understanding flickered in Noah's eyes. You want to tell me why Marshal Garrett is trying to put bullets in you? Delilah stiffened. How did you know it was Marshal Garrett? Recognized his shooting style. Man likes to fire 3 times, then pause exactly 8 seconds before firing again. Predictable. Noah secured the bandage and sat back. Also recognized his voice when he was shouting. You know him, Delilah stated, not a question. Everyone in these parts knows Garrett, Noah replied, standing to tend to his horse. Question is, what did you do to get on his bad side? Delilah watched him unsaddle the horse, her mind racing. She didn't know this man, had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had saved her life. Yet something told her that if she ran now, she wouldn't get far. And Noah Quinn seemed like the sort of man who might be able to help her if he was willing once he knew the truth. I killed his brother, she said finally, her voice flat. Noah's hands stilled on the saddle, but he didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his expression was carefully neutral. That would do it. Delilah waited for him to demand she leave, or worse, to decide to turn her in for whatever reward Garrett was surely offering. Instead, he simply asked, did he deserve it? The question caught her off guard. She had expected judgment, condemnation, not this simple inquiry that cut to the heart of everything. Yes, she whispered, the word carrying all the weight of her fear and fury. Victor Garrett was a monster. Noah nodded once, accepting her answer without pressing further. He finished tending to his horse, then set about building a small, smokeless fire as twilight deepened around them. We'll stay here tonight, he said, stirring a pot of beans he'd set to warm. Tomorrow we'll figure out where to go. Delilah couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Noah passed her a tin cup filled with hot coffee. Unless you'd rather face Garrett alone. No, but she wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for its warmth as the desert night grew cool. You don't even know me, and now you've made yourself a target too. I've been a target before, Noah replied with a shrug. As for not knowing you, I reckon we've got time to remedy that. They ate a simple meal in relative silence, the crackling fire and distant coyote calls the only sounds breaking the quiet night. Afterward, Noah offered Delilah his bedroll while he took first watch, settling himself against a rock with his rifle across his knees. Get some sleep, he advised. We'll need to move at first light. Delilah hesitated. Noah, thank you. He tipped his hat slightly, his face half in shadow. Don't thank me yet, Miss Blackburn. We're still a long way from safe. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Delilah. She lay awake, staring at the stars visible through the branches of the lean-to, wondering how her life had come to this. 6 months ago, she had been the respectable daughter of a shopkeeper in Santa Fe. Now she was a fugitive, running for her life with a stranger whose motivations she couldn't fathom. You should be resting. Noah's voice came softly through the darkness. I can't stop thinking, she admitted. About how quickly everything changed. For a long moment, Noah was silent. Then he said, that's the way of life out here. Things change in an instant, good to bad, bad to worse, sometimes bad to better if you're lucky. Are you lucky, Mr. Quinn? The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks that momentarily illuminated his face. Not particularly, but I'm still breathing, which counts for something. How did you know I was in trouble? Delilah asked, the question that had been nagging at her finally finding voice. I was tracking Garrett, Noah said after a pause. He's been causing trouble all through the territory. Didn't expect to find him taking shots at a lady. Tracking him for what purpose? Noah shifted, and in the dim light, she could see him roll a cigarette with practiced fingers. "Let's just say we have unfinished business, him and I." "You're not a lawman," Delilah observed. "No, madam, I am not." He struck a match, the flare briefly illuminating his face, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar that bisected one eyebrow. "I was a scout for the army for a time. Before that, various occupations. These days I mostly keep to myself. Yet here you are, involving yourself in my troubles." Noah exhaled a stream of smoke that disappeared into the night air. "Here I am." Morning came with a hint of rose gold on the eastern horizon. Delilah woke to find Noah already alert, brewing coffee and checking his weapons. He had a focused intensity about him in the early light, a man clearly accustomed to living with danger. "We need to move," he said when he noticed she was awake. "Garrett's not a man to give up easily." "Where are we going?" Delilah asked, quickly splashing water on her face from the canteen he offered. "South," Noah replied, extinguishing the fire and erasing all signs of their camp with efficiency. "I know a place in the Dragoon Mountains. Man who owns it owes me a favor." "Is it far?" 2 days hard riding." Noah glanced at her torn dress. "You can't travel like that. I have spare clothes in my pack." The shirt and trousers he provided were too large, but Delilah was beyond caring about propriety. She changed behind a stand of rocks, rolling up the sleeves and cinching the pants with a piece of rope. When she emerged, Noah gave her an appraising look. "Better for riding," he said simply. "Your hair will draw attention, though." Without ceremony, he pulled a knife from his boot. Delilah stepped back instinctively, but he just held the knife out to her, handle first. "Your choice," he said. "But long, dark hair like that. Garrett's likely described you to others by now." Delilah stared at the knife, then took it with a trembling hand. Her hair had always been her pride, falling in thick waves to her waist. But Noah was right. It was a liability now. "Would you?" She started, then steeled herself. "Would you do it?" "I don't think I can." Noah hesitated, then nodded once. He led her to sit on a flat rock and moved behind her. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as they gathered her hair. "I'll keep it long enough to tie back," he said. "No need to go further than practical." The sound of the blade slicing through her hair was terrible, final. Delilah closed her eyes, feeling the weight lift from her head with each cut. When Noah finished, he handed her a small metal mirror from his pack. The woman who stared back was a stranger, hair now falling just past her shoulders, face smudged with dust and strain. She looked wilder, somehow more herself than she had been before. "Thank you," she said, handing back the mirror. Noah nodded, already gathering their supplies. "We should get moving." They rode double again, Delilah in front with Noah's arms encircling her to hold the reins. The desert landscape stretched around them, beautiful and harsh in the morning light. Despite the circumstances, Delilah found herself noticing the way the sun caught the red rocks, how tiny wildflowers stubbornly bloomed in seemingly barren soil. "Have you always lived in the territory?" she asked after they had ridden in silence for several hours. "Born in Pennsylvania," Noah replied. "Came west after the war. You fought Union cavalry." "Too young, really, but I lied about my age." His voice was matter of fact. "You're from back east too, aren't you? Your accent gives you away." "Boston, originally," Delilah confirmed. "My father moved us to Santa Fe after my mother died. He thought the air would be better for my sister's consumption." "And was it?" Delilah's hands tightened on the saddle horn. "For a time. She died anyway 2 years ago." Noah didn't offer empty condolences, which Delilah appreciated. Instead, he simply asked, "And your father passed last autumn?" His heart. The familiar ache of loss washed through her. "That's when everything started to change." "How so?" Delilah hesitated, then decided there was little point in keeping secrets from the man who had risked his life for hers. After Father died, I kept the store running. It was successful. We carried supplies for settlers, tools, dry goods. Victor Garrett started coming around. At first, I thought he was just a customer. Noah's arms tensed slightly around her, but his voice remained steady. And he wasn't. No. He wanted the store, said a woman had no business running such an establishment. The bitterness crept back into her voice. When I refused to sell, he tried other methods of persuasion. I can imagine, Noah said quietly. He threatened me. Then he threatened my employees. When that didn't work, he had his men set fire to my storeroom. Delilah swallowed hard. The sheriff did nothing. Victor's brother Marshall Garrett made sure of that. The Garretts have been buying up businesses all through the territory, Noah confirmed, using whatever methods necessary. They paused at midday to rest the horse and eat a sparse meal of jerky and hardtack. Noah studied the horizon with narrowed eyes, constantly vigilant. "What happened the night you killed Victor?" he asked finally, passing her the canteen. Delilah took a long drink before answering. "He came to my home, said his patience had run out." Her voice grew hollow. "He attacked me. I had my father's Derringer in my desk. I only meant to scare him, but he kept coming," Noah finished for her. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "I ran. I knew Marshall would never believe it was self-defense. Victor was too well connected, too respected in town." A bitter laugh escaped her. "The pillar of the community, they called him. If they only knew." Noah's expression hardened. "Men like that hide their true nature from the world." "It doesn't make what they do any less real." Something in his tone made Delilah look up sharply. "You speak from experience. Let's just say I understand why you ran." Noah stood, effectively ending that line of conversation. "We should keep moving." As they continued south, the terrain grew more rugged. Noah guided his horse through narrow canyons and dry washes with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the land. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the western horizon, promising a rare summer storm. "There's an old line shack about an hour ahead," Noah said. "We should shelter there for the night." The weather moved in faster than expected. Fat raindrops began to fall as they approached the dilapidated structure nestled against a hillside. By the time they dismounted, the rain was coming down in sheets, turning the dusty ground to slick mud. Noah led his horse to a lean-to attached to the shack, then hurried Delilah inside. The interior was Spartan but found a single room with a small iron stove, a rough wooden table with one chair, and a narrow cot against the far wall. "Not exactly the Palmer house," Noah commented wryly, lighting a lantern he found on a shelf. "It's dry," Delilah replied, wringing water from her shortened hair. "That's luxury enough." Noah busied himself getting a fire started in the stove while Delilah took stock of their surroundings. Someone had used the shack. Relatively recently, there was a small stack of firewood, a few canned goods on a shelf, and a jug of what proved to be surprisingly clean water. "Line riders use these places during roundup," Noah explained, noticing her examination. "Code of the West says you leave something for the next traveler." The small stove soon warmed the space, and they hung their wet outer clothes on nails pounded into the wall beams. Noah produced a can of peaches from his saddlebag for emergencies, he said with a hint of a smile which they shared as the rain drummed steadily on the tin roof. "You never told me why you're tracking Garrett," Delilah said as they finished their meager feast. Noah was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, controlled in a way that suggested powerful emotion held rigidly in check. 3 years ago, I had a small ranch north of Prescott. Nothing fancy, a cabin, some decent grazing land, about 40 head of cattle. I was building something. He stared into the glowing door of the stove. The Garretts wanted to run a spur line through the valley, needed my water rights. And you wouldn't sell, Delilah guessed. Couldn't. That water was what made the land valuable. Noah's jaw tightened. One night while I was in town for supplies, someone stampeded my cattle through my fences, then burned my cabin to the ground. The Garretts. Noah nodded once. Never could prove it, but everyone knew. So now you're hunting them. I've been watching them, gathering evidence. Rumors are they've done the same to a dozen other small ranchers and business folk. His eyes, when they met hers, burned with quiet intensity. They've hurt a lot of people, Delilah. But they've always been careful to keep their hands clean. Until now, Delilah said softly, until Victor came after me himself. Until Victor ended up dead by your hand, Noah agreed. Which makes you either a liability they need to eliminate, or the perfect scapegoat, Delilah finished, understanding dawning. Marshall won't just want me dead for revenge. He needs to make sure I can't tell anyone what his brother did. The revelation hung heavy between them. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert, punctuating the gravity of her situation. Get some sleep, Noah said finally. Take the cot. I'll keep watch. Exhaustion overtook Delilah despite her racing mind. She drifted off to the sound of rain and the occasional creak of the chair as Noah moved to check the windows. She dreamed of Victor Garrett's face, contorted with rage as he advanced on her. In the dream, the Derringer misfired and she was trapped, cornered like an animal. She woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright on the cot. Easy, Noah's voice came from nearby. He was sitting on the floor beside the cot, his back against the wall. Just a dream. Delilah's heart hammered in her chest. I keep seeing his face. First man you killed. She nodded, drawing her knees to her chest. It stays with you, Noah said, no judgment in his voice. Even when they deserve it, maybe especially then. Does it ever get easier? It shouldn't. Noah's gaze was steady. The day taking a life gets easy is the day you become something you don't want to be. The simple wisdom of his words resonated with something deep inside her. Delilah studied him in the dim light from the bank stove. You're not what I expected, Noah Quinn. A corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. What did you expect? I'm not sure, she admitted. Not someone who would quote the code of the West one minute and philosophy the next. Disappointed. There was a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. No, Delilah said softly. The opposite, actually. Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, that they were no longer merely two strangers thrown together by circumstance. Noah cleared his throat and stood, breaking the moment. Storm's passing, he observed, glancing out the window. Few more hours till dawn. Try to rest while you can. Morning arrived clear and brilliant, the storm having washed the world clean. They set out early, making good time across the desert landscape that gradually gave way to the foothills of the mountains. Noah kept them off the main trails, following game paths and dry washes that would leave minimal tracks. By mid-afternoon, they had climbed high enough that Delilah could look back and see the vast expanse they had traveled. The sensation was dizzying, both the distance and the knowledge that somewhere back there, Marshall Garrett was hunting them. How much farther? She asked as they paused to rest the horse. We'll reach James's place by nightfall, Noah replied, scanning the horizon with a practiced eye. He's an old army friend. Ranch is remote, hard to find unless you know where to look. Can he be trusted? Noah handed her the canteen. With our lives. Which is exactly what we'll be doing. They continued their journey, the terrain growing steeper and more densely forested. Pine trees replaced the desert scrub, and the air cooled noticeably. Noah grew more alert, if possible, his hand often straying to the rifle in its scabbard. "Someone's following us," he said quietly as they crossed a stream in late afternoon. "Has been since midday." Delilah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Garrett, maybe. Noah's expression was grim. Or someone working for him. Either way, we need to pick up the pace. They pushed harder, the horse laboring up the steep trails. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, Noah led them through a narrow pass that opened suddenly into a small, hidden valley. A cabin stood near the center, smoke curling from its chimney. Several outbuildings and corrals completed the small ranch, nestled against the mountainside like a secret. A man emerged from the cabin as they approached, rifle in hand. He was tall and lean, with a shock of gray-streaked red hair and a face weathered by years in the elements. "That you, Quinn?" he called, squinting against the setting sun. "It's me, James," Noah replied, raising one hand in greeting. "And a friend who needs help." James Murray lowered his rifle and approached as Noah dismounted and helped Delilah down. Up close, Delilah could see the man was older than she had initially thought, perhaps in his late 40s, with intelligent green eyes that missed nothing. "Miss," he greeted her with a slight nod before turning to Noah. "You're being followed. 2 riders moving fast." Noah's face hardened. "How far?" "Half hour, maybe less. Spotted them from the north ridge." James gestured toward the cabin. "Better get inside and tell me what kind of trouble you've brought to my doorstep." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable, well furnished with handcrafted wooden chairs and tables, bookshelves filled with volumes, and colorful woven rugs on the plank floors. A woman emerged from the kitchen area, wiping her hands on an apron. She was Apache, her black hair streaked with silver, her face lined but beautiful. "This is my wife, Nayeli," James introduced her. "And you must be the woman half the territory is looking for." Delilah froze, but Nayeli merely smiled and placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Any enemy of the Garretts is welcome here," she said, her English accented but clear. As Nayeli served them a hearty stew with fresh bread, Noah quickly explained their situation. James listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances with his wife. "Marshal Garrett's been pushing boundaries for years," James said when Noah finished. "But this is bold, even for him hunting a woman across the territory." "She killed his brother," Noah reminded him. James's gaze settled on Delilah. Did he deserve killing? It was the second time she had been asked that question. "Yes," she answered simply. James nodded, satisfied. "Then that's that. Question now is what to do about the men on your trail." "Could be Garrett himself," Noah said. "More likely his hired guns." "Either way, they can't find you here," James said firmly. "We'll head them off at the pass, make them think you continued south." "I won't put your family at risk," Noah protested. James's expression hardened. "The Garretts burned my brother's place 2 years ago when he wouldn't sell his mining claim. He died in that fire." He exchanged a look with Nayeli. "We've been waiting for a chance to strike back." "They won't expect resistance," Nayeli added. "They believe everyone fears them too much to fight." A plan quickly took shape. James would intercept the pursuers at the pass, leading them to believe Noah and Delilah had continued through toward the Mexican border. Meanwhile, Noah and Delilah would remain hidden at the ranch until it was safe to move again. As darkness fell, James prepared to leave. Noah walked outside with him, and Delilah could see them in serious conversation by the corral, occasionally glancing back toward the cabin. "He will keep James safe," Nayeli said, noticing Delilah's concern. "Noah Quinn is a good man, the best kind." "You know him well?" Delilah asked. Nayeli smiled. "He saved James's life during the war and mine during the troubles with the army afterward." She studied Delilah with knowing eyes. He has suffered much, lost much, but his heart remains strong. I've only known him for 2 days, Delilah said softly. Sometimes 2 days is enough, Naomi replied. When the spirits bring 2 souls together, time matters little. Before Delilah could respond to this unexpected statement, the door opened, and Noah returned. His face was tense, but he managed a small smile when he saw her. James is on his way, he said. Now we wait. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Naomi showed Delilah to a small bedroom where she could wash and change into a clean dress. Looking at her reflection in a small mirror, Delilah barely recognized herself. Her shortened hair curled wildly around her face, emphasizing her high cheekbones and large eyes. The woman who stared back seemed stronger somehow, more determined than the shopkeeper's daughter who had fled Santa Fe. When she emerged, she found Noah standing by the window, one shoulder propped against the frame as he kept watch. He turned at her approach, and something flickered in his eyes that made her breath catch. "You look rested," he said, his voice low. "I feel human again," she replied with a small smile. "Thank you, Noah, for everything." He shook his head slightly. "Don't thank me yet. We're still a long way from safe. Even so, you didn't have to help me." "Yes, I did." The simple certainty in his voice silenced any further protest. They ate a quiet supper with Naomi, who told stories of the mountains and the people who had lived there for generations. Despite the circumstances, Delilah found herself relaxing in the warm kitchen, drawn into the older woman's tales. It was well past midnight when the sound of hoofbeats announced James's return. Noah was instantly alert, gun drawn, positioning himself between the door and the women. "It's me," James called before entering. He looked tired but satisfied as he hung his hat by the door. "They took the bait. Followed my false trail all the way to Davidson's Pass before I lost them in the dark." "Garrett?" Noah asked tersely. James shook his head. "2 of his men. Recognized Ben Hollister for sure. Other might have been that Mexican feller rides with him sometimes." "They'll realize they've been tricked by morning," Noah said grimly. "Maybe." James accepted a cup of coffee from his wife. "But they'll be 20 miles south by then, and the rain washed out most of your actual trail. Should buy you some time." "We can't stay here," Noah said, glancing at Delilah. "It's not fair to put you both at risk." "You'll stay at least until tomorrow night," Naomi said firmly. "You need rest, and so does your horse." Noah looked ready to argue, but James cut him off. "She's right, Quinn. You're no good to the lady if you're dead on your feet. Besides, I've got something that might help you." That something turned out to be information. Over breakfast the next morning, James spread a map across the table, pointing out the locations of known Garrett operations. "They've been consolidating power all through the territory," he explained. "Buying up land, businesses, mining claims, or taking them when people won't sell." "We knew that much," Noah said, studying the map. "What you might not know is they've got a paper trail." James tapped a spot on the map. "Fellow named Evans worked as their bookkeeper, kept records of everything: the threats, the arsons, the payoffs to officials. Story goes he had a crisis of conscience when they had the Anderson family run off their place last winter. Mrs. Anderson was expecting, lost the baby during the flight." Noah's face darkened. "Where's Evans now?" "Dead, supposedly. Fell from his horse into the Gila River." James's expression was grim. "Convenient accident." "But the records?" Delilah asked, following the conversation intently. "Hidden," James replied. "Evans told a friend he had documentation that would destroy the Garretts. Said he'd put it somewhere they'd never look." "That's not much to go on," Noah observed. "It's more than we had before," Delilah said, a new determination in her voice. "If we could find those records, we could stop running. We could fight back." Noah studied her for a long moment, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. "It's a long shot." "Do you have a better idea?" she challenged. A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile Delilah had seen from him. It transformed his features, lighting his blue eyes with warmth. "No, madam, I don't believe I do." They spent the day gathering supplies and information. James had connections throughout the territory and sent messages to trusted friends who might know more about Evans or the hidden documents. Naomi taught Delilah how to use a knife for protection, demonstrating techniques with patience and skill. "The blade is an extension of your will," she explained, guiding Delilah's hand. "Not just a weapon, but a tool for survival." By evening, they had a rough plan. Evans had lived in the small town of Cedar Creek before working for the Garretts. If he had hidden incriminating documents, that would be the logical place to start looking. "It's risky," Noah warned as they prepared to leave. "Cedar Creek isn't large. People will notice strangers." "We'll be careful," Delilah replied, adjusting the borrowed riding clothes. Naomi had provided practical split skirts and a sturdy jacket. "And we won't be strangers. We'll be a married couple looking to settle in the area." Noah raised an eyebrow at this addition to their plan. "It makes sense," Delilah insisted. "A woman traveling alone with a man draws attention. A married couple doesn't." "She's right," Naomi said, packing food for their journey, "and you will need different names." They departed under cover of darkness, with heartfelt thanks and promises to send word when they could. James had provided a second horse for Delilah, a steady bay mare with good stamina. His name was Matthew Evans, James told them as a final piece of information. Kept to himself mostly, but attended the Methodist church regular. If he hid something important, might be someone there would know. The night was clear and cool as they rode out, the stars brilliant overhead. They traveled in silence for several hours, making good time along the forest trails. When they finally stopped to rest near dawn, Delilah found herself studying Noah as he tended the horses. In the soft pre-dawn light, she could see beyond the hard exterior to the man beneath, careful, methodical, carrying burdens he rarely spoke of. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "If we find the evidence and clear my name," Noah looked up, surprised by the question. "Haven't thought that far ahead. You must have plans, dreams." Delilah persisted. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Then I had dreams once, land of my own, maybe a family someday." His voice was soft, almost wistful. "Then the Garretts happened. And after, when they're brought to justice," Noah straightened, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "First things first, Delilah, let's focus on keeping you alive and finding those documents." They reached the outskirts of Cedar Creek 2 days later, approaching from the north to avoid main roads where they might be recognized. It was a typical frontier town, one main street lined with essential businesses, a scatter of homes and farms surrounding it, a white church steeple rising above the other buildings. "We'll need a story," Noah said as they paused on a ridge overlooking the settlement. "Something believable." "We're newlyweds," Delilah suggested, thinking quickly. "Looking for a fresh start after losing our farm to drought back east." Noah nodded, considering. "Names, Nathan and Deanna Russell," Delilah decided. "From Kansas." "Simple enough to remember," Noah agreed. "We'll need to find lodging first, then start asking careful questions." The town's single boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Henderson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who clearly missed very little. She showed them to a small but clean room on the second floor, chattering all the while about the town and its inhabitants. "Not many newcomers these days," she observed, eyeing their travel-worn appearance. "What brings you to Cedar Creek?" "Looking for land," Noah replied smoothly, slipping into his role as Nathan Russell. Heard there might be opportunities in this area. My husband is very good with horses, Delilah added, laying a hand on Noah's arm in a gesture that seemed natural despite its unfamiliarity. We're hoping to start a small breeding operation. Mrs. Henderson nodded, apparently satisfied with their story. You'll want to speak with Mr. Collins at the land office then, and Sunday services would be a good way to meet folks. Reverend Stone is always welcoming to new faces. After she left, Delilah sat on the edge of the narrow bed, suddenly aware of their intimate surroundings. A single bed, a small washstand, a chest of drawers, and a rocking chair comprised the room's entire furnishings. I'll sleep on the floor, Noah said immediately, reading her discomfort. Don't be ridiculous, Delilah replied, gathering her composure. We're supposed to be married. If Mrs. Henderson found out we're not sharing the bed, she'd be suspicious. Noah's expression remained carefully neutral. We'll manage. They spent the afternoon reconnoitering the town, carefully observing its layout and residents, while appearing to be nothing more than a curious young couple exploring their new surroundings. They discovered that the Methodist Church held services twice on Sundays and had a ladies' aid society that met on Wednesday afternoons. That might be your way in, Noah suggested as they shared a modest dinner at the town's only restaurant. Join the meeting, get to know the women. They'll know all the gossip about former residents. And you? Delilah asked. I'll visit the saloon, Noah replied. Men talk freely over whiskey, might learn something about Evans or his friends. Their plan set, they returned to the boarding house. The awkwardness of sharing the small room was palpable as they prepared for bed. Noah turned his back politely, while Delilah changed into the nightgown Naomi had packed for her, and she did the same while he stripped down to his long underwear. The bed creaked protestingly as they both gingerly settled on opposite edges, maintaining as much distance as the narrow mattress would allow. This is absurd, Delilah whispered after several minutes of rigid discomfort. We've spent days together in far more dangerous circumstances. That was different, Noah murmured back. This is. He trailed off, apparently unable to define exactly what this was. We're adults, Delilah said reasonably, and nothing improper is happening. We're simply sharing a bed out of necessity. Noah made a non-committal sound that might have been agreement. After a few more minutes of tense silence, Delilah felt him gradually relax beside her. His breathing deepened, and she realized he had fallen asleep, the exhaustion of constant vigilance finally catching up to him. She studied his profile in the moonlight filtering through the thin curtains. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened. He looked younger, unburdened by the wariness he carried during waking hours. Without thinking, Delilah reached out to brush a strand of hair from his forehead. Noah's hand shot up, catching her wrist in a grip that was firm but not painful. His eyes opened, instantly alert. Sorry, he said, immediately releasing her. Old habits. No, I'm sorry, Delilah whispered. I didn't mean to startle you. Their faces were close in the darkness, close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek. Something electric passed between them, a current of awareness that had been building since that first day behind the overturned wagon. Noah was the first to break the moment, turning onto his back to stare at the ceiling. We should sleep. Tomorrow we'll be busy. Delilah nodded, though he couldn't see it, and turned to face the wall. Despite the tumult of her thoughts, exhaustion soon claimed her, and she drifted into dreamless sleep. The Methodist Church was a simple white painted structure with modest stained glass windows and well-worn pews. Delilah sat beside Noah during the Sunday service, acutely conscious of his solid presence and the way his arm occasionally brushed against hers. They had both dressed in their best clothes, Noah in a clean white shirt and dark jacket borrowed from James, Delilah in a somber blue dress that Naomi had altered to fit her. Reverend Stone was a kindly man in his 60s who preached a sermon on perseverance through trials that seemed uncomfortably relevant to their situation. After the service, the congregation gathered outside for social time, and Noah and Delilah were quickly surrounded by curious townsfolk. "The Russells, yes," Mrs. Henderson was saying to an older woman. "Just arrived from Kansas, looking to start a horse breeding operation." Noah played his part perfectly, discussing soil conditions and water rights with the men while Delilah chatted with the women about the challenges of setting up a new home. "You must join Our Ladies' Aid Society," urged Mrs. Stone, the Reverend's wife. "We meet Wednesdays at 2. Nothing fancy, just sewing and conversation, but it helps the time pass." "I'd be delighted," Delilah replied with a genuine smile. These women reminded her of the ones she had known in Santa Fe, hardworking, practical, and fundamentally kind. It was during these pleasantries that Delilah first heard Matthew Evans's name mentioned. "Such a tragedy about poor Matthew," an older woman was saying. "Always so good about visiting his mother's grave, right up until he left town." Delilah casually moved closer to the conversation. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. Was this a resident who passed recently?" The women exchanged glances. "No, dear," the first woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Caldwell, explained. "Matthew Evans moved away several years ago for a position with some business concern in Phoenix. But he was raised here and his mother is buried in our cemetery. He was very devoted to her memory." "I see," Delilah said, filing away this information. "How sad to lose a mother young. Indeed. He was just a boy when consumption took her. His father never remarried, raised Matthew alone until his own passing." Mrs. Caldwell sighed. "Matthew was always a serious child but very bright. We all expected great things from him." Later, as they walked back to the boarding house, Delilah relayed what she had learned to Noah. "His mother's grave," Noah mused. "That could be significant." "A place of personal importance," Delilah agreed. "Somewhere he visited regularly that had meaning only to him." "And somewhere the Garretts would never think to look," Noah added. "It's worth investigating." "The cemetery is behind the church. We could visit this evening after dark." Noah nodded, but his expression was troubled. "We need to be careful. 2 newcomers showing too much interest in a former resident might raise questions." "Then let's give them something else to talk about," Delilah suggested. Impulsively, she took his hand in hers as they walked down the main street, aware of curious eyes watching from porches and storefronts. Noah's startled glance quickly gave way to understanding. He squeezed her hand lightly and leaned closer. "Playing the besotted husband, Mrs. Russell." "Precisely, Mr. Russell," she replied, surprised by how natural it felt. "No one will question our midnight strolls if they think we're just seeking privacy." Noah's slow smile made her heart skip a beat. "Clever," he murmured. "Very clever." The cemetery was silent under the crescent moon as they picked their way carefully between the graves. Noah carried a small, shielded lantern, its light barely enough to read the weathered headstones. "Evans," Delilah whispered, pointing to a modest marker near the far corner. "Margaret Evans, beloved wife and mother, 1821–1858. They approached the grave reverently. It was simple but well-maintained, with dried flowers suggesting recent visits despite Evans's supposed death. "Someone still cares for it," Noah observed. Kneeling to examine the headstone more closely, Delilah joined him, running her fingers lightly over the carved surface. "What are we looking for? Anything unusual?" "A mark, a loose stone, anything that might indicate." Noah broke off as his fingers caught on something at the base of the headstone. Here. Delilah leaned closer as Noah worked his knife blade into a small gap. With a soft scraping sound, a section of the base shifted, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside was an oilskin packet, tightly wrapped and sealed with wax. "This is it," Delilah breathed, her heart racing. Noah carefully extracted the packet and replaced the stone section exactly as it had been. "Let's get back. We can examine this in private." They had barely taken 3 steps when a voice called out from the darkness. "That's far enough." Noah extinguished the lantern instantly, pushing Delilah behind him as he drew his pistol. "Who's there?" A match flared, illuminating the face of a man in his early 30s with wire-rimmed spectacles and a nervous expression. He held a shotgun that wavered slightly in his hands. "The question is, who are you, and why are you disturbing my mother's grave?" Noah and Delilah exchanged shocked glances. "Matthew Evans," Delilah ventured. The man's eyes widened in alarm. "How do you know my name? We thought you were dead," Noah said cautiously, keeping his gun trained on the stranger. "Drowned in the Gila River." Evans gave a bitter laugh. "That's what the Garretts think too." "I'd like to keep it that way." He gestured with the shotgun. "Now, please explain why you're here before I lose my patience." "My name is Delilah Blackburn," Delilah said, stepping forward despite Noah's protective arm. "Victor Garrett tried to force me to sell my store in Santa Fe. When I refused, he attacked me. I killed him defending myself." Evans's expression shifted from suspicion to shock. "You killed Victor Garrett. Marshal Garrett has been hunting us ever since," Noah added. "We heard you might have evidence of the Garrett's crimes, evidence that could stop them." Evans studied them for a long moment, conflict evident on his face. Finally, he lowered the shotgun. "Come with me. Not to my home, it's not safe. I have a place we can talk." The place turned out to be a small cabin hidden in a stand of pines at the edge of town. Evans explained that he had staged his own death after hiding the documents, knowing the Garretts would kill him if they discovered what he had done. "I've been living under another name," he said as he lit a lamp in the sparse cabin. "Working as a clerk in the general store, keeping my head down." "Yet you still visit your mother's grave," Delilah observed. Evans smiled sadly. "Old habits. I should know better, but she was the only person who ever really believed in me." On the rough-hewn table, Noah carefully opened the oilskin packet. Inside were ledgers, contracts, and letters, meticulously organized documentation of the Garretts' operations throughout the territory. "It's all here," Evans confirmed as they examined the papers. "Proof of falsified deeds, bribes to officials, orders for arson and intimidation, even murder." "Including your brother's ranch?" Noah asked, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Evans nodded. "The Quinn place north of Prescott. It's listed here as acquisition by necessary force. They paid 3 men to stampede the cattle and burn the property." Noah's hands clenched into fists on the table. Delilah placed her hand over his, feeling the tremors of rage running through him. "There's more," Evans continued, pulling out a particular document. "This letter from Marshall to Victor discusses eliminating a troublesome shopkeeper in Santa Fe if she continues to resist. It's dated 2 weeks before your confrontation with Victor." Delilah felt cold as the implications sank in. "It wasn't just about buying my store. They planned to kill me all along. The Garretts don't like being told no," Evans said grimly, "especially by a woman." "With these documents, we could bring them to justice," Noah said, his voice steadying under Delilah's touch. "But we'd need to get them to the federal marshal in Tucson. The local law is too corrupt. It's at least 4 days hard riding," Evans warned, "and Marshal Garrett will have men watching all the main routes. Then we don't take the main routes, Delilah said firmly. We go cross-country through the mountains. They spent hours planning their journey, Evans providing detailed maps and information about Garrett operations they would need to avoid. By dawn, they had a route mapped out and provisions gathered. "I'm coming with you," Evans announced as they prepared to leave. "These are my documents. My testimony will be needed to authenticate them." Noah studied the man thoughtfully. "It'll be dangerous. Garrett has men everywhere and they're looking for Delilah." "I've been hiding for a year," Evans replied, a new determination in his voice. "Watching the Garretts continue to hurt people while I did nothing. It's time I stood up." They slipped out of Cedar Creek before sunrise, traveling northwest into the rugged country where they would be harder to track. Evans proved to be a surprisingly capable rider despite his scholarly appearance, keeping pace as they pushed hard through the difficult terrain. By midday, they had covered significant ground, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold meal. Noah remained vigilant, constantly scanning their back trail for signs of pursuit. "You think anyone in town suspected?" Delilah asked as they prepared to continue. "Hard to say," Noah replied. "We kept to ourselves mostly, but in small towns people notice strangers. Mrs. Henderson seemed suspicious this morning," Evans added. "Asked a lot of questions about where we were going so early." Noah's expression darkened. "Then we should assume word has already reached Garrett. We need to keep moving." They rode through the afternoon, the landscape growing increasingly wild and beautiful. Pine forests gave way to rocky outcroppings and hidden valleys. By evening, they had reached a high plateau overlooking a vast expanse of territory. "We'll camp here," Noah decided, indicating a sheltered spot near a small spring. Good visibility in all directions and water for the horses. As they set up camp, Delilah found herself watching Noah, the efficient way he moved, the quiet confidence in his actions. In the days since he had first come to her rescue, something had shifted between them. What had begun as necessity had grown into something else entirely. Later, as they sat around a small, carefully shielded fire, Evans voiced the question that had been on Delilah's mind. What happens after? If we succeed in bringing down the Garretts? Noah stared into the flames, his expression unreadable. Justice, hopefully, for everyone they've hurt. I meant for you too, Evans clarified. Will you go back to Santa Fe, Delilah? The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on survival that she hadn't thought much beyond the immediate future. I don't know, she admitted. There's nothing for me there anymore. And you, Quinn? Evans pressed. Back to ranching. Noah glanced at Delilah, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Haven't decided yet. Might depend on certain factors. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Evans, sensing the shift in atmosphere, volunteered to take first watch and moved away to give them privacy. Noah, Delilah began, uncertain how to express the tumult of feelings that had been building inside her. You should get some rest, he said softly, still not meeting her eyes. We have a long ride tomorrow. Is that all you have to say? She pressed, frustration overriding caution. Now he looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. What would you have me say, Delilah? That I've come to care for you, that I think about what might happen if we survive this? Yes, she replied simply. That's exactly what I'd have you say. Noah ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncharacteristic uncertainty. I'm not a man with much to offer. Everything I built was taken from me. I'm not asking for possessions, Delilah said. I had those in Santa Fe and they didn't bring happiness. What are you asking for then? She moved closer until they were sitting side by side, shoulders touching. A chance, nothing more, nothing less. Noah's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers intertwining with her smaller ones. "A chance," he repeated softly. "I think I can manage that." They remained that way for a long while, watching the fire burn down to embers, the simple contact of their joined hands saying more than words could express. Dawn brought renewed determination and a clear plan. They would cross the mountains through Rattlesnake Pass, then follow the Verd River south toward Tucson. If all went well, they could reach the federal marshal's office in 4 days. The morning's ride was uneventful, the three travelers falling into an easy rhythm as they navigated the difficult terrain. Evans proved surprisingly knowledgeable about the area, pointing out landmarks and sharing the history of the land. It was late afternoon when Noah suddenly raised his hand, signaling for them to halt. He dismounted silently, listening intently before dropping to one knee to examine the ground. "Riders," he said grimly. "At least 4, moving fast, crossed our path about an hour ago, heading toward the pass." "Garrett's men?" Delilah asked, fear clutching at her heart. Noah nodded. "Almost certainly. They're cutting us off." Evans's face paled. "How did they know our route?" "Someone in Cedar Creek must have guessed," Noah replied, his mind working rapidly. "Or they've just positioned men at all the likely crossings." "What do we do?" Delilah asked, trusting Noah's judgment implicitly. He studied the terrain, weighing their options. "We can't go back, and we can't use the pass if they're waiting for us." His eyes scanned the ridgeline. "There's another way through, an old Apache trail. It's dangerous narrow paths along cliff faces, barely wide enough for a horse. But if we can make it, we'll come out well south of where they're waiting." "And if we can't make it?" Evans asked nervously. Noah's expression was grim. "Then we'll have different problems than Marshal Garrett." The decision made, they turned east, climbing toward a seemingly impassable wall of rock. Noah led them confidently, following game trails that gradually revealed the hidden path he had described. By sunset, they were inching along a narrow ledge that dropped away hundreds of feet on one side. The horses moved carefully, sensing the danger, while their riders maintained tense silence. "We'll rest here," Noah finally announced as they reached a small, flat area sheltered by overhanging rock. Too dangerous to continue in the dark. They made a cold camp, not risking a fire that might be seen from below. As night fell, the temperature dropped dramatically, the mountain air turning bitterly cold. They huddled together for warmth, taking turns keeping watch. During her watch, Delilah found herself contemplating how much her life had changed in the space of a week. She had gone from shopkeeper to fugitive to whatever she was now, a woman on the edge of something new, a woman who had discovered her own strength. Her thoughts turned to Noah, sleeping nearby. He had shown her a kind of steadfastness she had never known before, a quiet, unwavering commitment to doing what was right, no matter the cost. In the stillness of the mountain night, Delilah acknowledged to herself what she had perhaps known since that first day. She was falling in love with him. Morning revealed the full extent of their precarious position. The path ahead narrowed even further, in some places barely wide enough for a horse to pass. Below them, the valley floor seemed impossibly distant. "We'll go on foot," Noah decided, studying the treacherous route. "Lead the horses single file. Evans, you go first, then Delilah, then me." They proceeded with agonizing slowness, every step carefully placed. The sun beat down mercilessly, making the rock face hot to the touch. Hours passed in tense concentration, the only sounds their breathing and the occasional dislodged stone clattering down the cliff face. They had nearly reached the widest part of the trail when disaster struck. Evans's horse, spooked by a falling rock, reared suddenly. The panicked animal lost its footing on the narrow ledge, its hindquarters slipping over the edge. Evans cried out, desperately pulling on the reins to save his mount, but the horse's weight and momentum were too great. In a terrible instant, both horse and rider went over the edge, Evans's scream echoing off the canyon walls. "Matthew!" Delilah cried, lunging forward only to be caught firmly by Noah. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice tight with shock but still commanding. "The ledge is crumbling." They stood frozen, the horror of what had just happened washing over them. There was no possibility of survival from such a fall. "The documents," Delilah whispered, grief and desperation mingling. He had them in his saddlebags. Noah's face was grim as he carefully secured their remaining horses. "Stay here. Don't move." He inched forward to where the ledge had given way, peering over the edge. His expression told Delilah everything she needed to know. "We've lost both," he confirmed, returning to her side. "Evans and the evidence." Delilah pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back tears. In the short time she had known him, Evans had shown remarkable courage. To have come so far, only to lose everything. "What do we do now?" she asked when she could trust her voice again. Noah's eyes were hard, determined. "We continue. We tell the marshal what we know. It won't be as strong without the documents, but our testimony might still be enough." "And if it isn't?" The question hung heavy between them. "Then we'll find another way," Noah said firmly. "The Garretts will answer for what they've done, I promise you that." They continued along the treacherous path, each lost in their own thoughts. By late afternoon, they had successfully navigated the worst of the trail and descended into a narrow valley on the far side of the mountains. "We'll make camp here," Noah decided, indicating a small clearing near a stream. "Rest the horses and ourselves." As they set up camp, the full weight of Evans's death settled over them like a physical burden. Delilah moved mechanically, her mind replaying the terrible moment of his fall. "He was so brave," she said finally as they sat beside a small fire. "To have kept those records all this time, knowing what would happen if the Garretts found him." Noah nodded, his face solemn in the firelight. "Some men find their courage when it matters most. Do you think we still have a chance?" "Without the documents, a slim one," Noah admitted. "But we have to try, for Evans, for your store, for my ranch, for everyone the Garretts have hurt." Delilah moved closer to him, seeking comfort in his solid presence. "I'm glad you found me that day, Noah Quinn." He put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her against his side. "So am I." They reached Tucson 2 days later, dusty and exhausted but determined. The federal marshal's office was a simple adobe building near the courthouse, marked only by a weathered sign. Marshal James Cooper was a grizzled veteran of both the Civil War and the frontier, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened in silence as Delilah and Noah told their story, her confrontation with Victor Garrett, Noah's lost ranch, Evans's hidden documents and tragic death. When they finished, Cooper leaned back in his chair, regarding them thoughtfully. "That's quite a tale. And without these documents, you're asking me to move against one of the most powerful men in the territory on your word alone." "We understand how it sounds," Noah said evenly. "But everything we've told you is the truth." Cooper's gaze shifted to Delilah. "Miss Blackburn, by your own admission, you killed Victor Garrett. In self-defense," she replied, meeting his eyes without flinching. "He attacked me in my own home. So you say." Cooper sighed heavily. "Look, I've heard rumors about the Garretts for years, nothing I could act on but this." He shook his head. "Without evidence, my hands are tied." Delilah felt despair rising within her. They had risked everything, Evans had died, and it was all for nothing. Beside her, Noah's expression hardened. "So you'll do nothing?" he demanded. "Let them continue terrorizing innocent people." "I didn't say that," Cooper replied mildly. "I said I need evidence. Maybe there's a way to get it. Noah and Delilah exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Delilah asked cautiously. "Evans wasn't the only one keeping records," Cooper explained. "The Garrett's new bookkeeper, fellow named Wilson, has been seen drinking heavily lately, talking too much in his cups. Word is he's developing a conscience just like Evans did." "You want us to approach him?" Noah asked skeptically. Cooper shook his head. "Too dangerous. You're both known to Garrett by now, but I have deputies who aren't." He leaned forward. "Give me a week. Stay out of sight. If there's evidence to be found, we'll find it." It was the closest thing to hope they had encountered since Evans's death. Noah and Delilah agreed, taking rooms at a small boarding house on the outskirts of town under assumed names. For 7 days, they lived in limbo, venturing out only after dark, always watchful for Garrett's men. During those quiet days of waiting, their relationship deepened. They spoke of their pasts, their hopes, the possibilities that might lie ahead if they survived this ordeal. In the privacy of their small room, they found comfort in each other's arms, their growing love a beacon of light in the darkness that had engulfed their lives. On the morning of the 8th day, a messenger arrived with a summons to the marshal's office. They found Cooper looking grimly satisfied, a stack of ledgers on his desk. "Wilson came through," he announced without preamble. "Not as detailed as what Evans had by your description, but enough. Names, dates, amounts paid for special services, detailed records of properties acquired through intimidation." Relief washed over Delilah like a physical sensation. "Then you'll act against the Garretts," Cooper nodded. "Already have. Sent telegrams to federal authorities in Phoenix and Santa Fe. Arrest warrants are being prepared as we speak." "What about Marshal Garrett himself?" Noah asked, the tension in his voice revealing how much rode on the answer. Cooper's expression turned grim. "That's the complication. He's gone to ground. Left his main ranch 3 days ago, according to my informants. Could be anywhere in the territory by now. Or he could be coming for us," Delilah said quietly. "He knows we're the threat." "I've thought of that," Cooper replied. "I'm assigning deputies to protect you both until he's apprehended." Noah shook his head firmly. "With respect, Marshal, that makes us sitting targets. Garrett has spies everywhere, including law enforcement. The moment you assign men to guard us, you might as well publish our location in the newspaper." Cooper studied him with newfound respect. "What do you suggest?" "Let us disappear," Noah said simply. "Spread word that we've fled to California or Mexico. Meanwhile, we'll stay somewhere unexpected, somewhere Garrett would never look." "And where might that be?" Cooper asked skeptically. Noah and Delilah exchanged glances, a plan forming between them without words. "The last place anyone would expect," Delilah replied. "In plain sight." Their plan was audacious in its simplicity. While Cooper focused his men on dismantling the Garrett empire, Noah and Delilah returned to Cedar Creek not as fugitives, but as the respectable Mr. and Mrs. Russell, purchasing the general store from its aging owner with funds Cooper provided from the federal discretionary budget. "It's temporary," the marshal assured them. "Just until we capture Garrett. After that, the government will compensate you both properly for your assistance." They settled into the small community with surprising ease, building on the brief foundation they had established during their previous visit. Noah managed the store while Delilah joined the Ladies' Aid Society, gradually becoming fixtures in town life. Few connected the new shopkeepers with the fugitives reportedly last seen fleeing toward the Mexican border. Weeks passed, then months. Updates from Marshal Cooper arrived discreetly, informing them of progress in the case against the Garrett empire. Properties were being restored to rightful owners, corrupt officials removed from office, hidden assets seized. But Marshal Garrett himself remained elusive, a shadow at the edges of the territory. Throughout this time, Noah and Delilah's pretend marriage gradually became real in every way but legal documentation. They shared the small apartment above the store, no longer awkward in their intimacy. They made plans, dreamed together, found moments of joy despite the sword that still hung over their heads. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn when their fragile peace was shattered. The store was empty of customers, Noah inventorying supplies while Delilah arranged a display of canned goods. The bell above the door jingled and they both looked up to greet the customer. Marshall Garrett stood in the doorway, a revolver held casually at his side. "Mr. and Mrs. Russell," he said, his voice cultured, almost pleasant. "Or should I say Quinn and Blackburn? You've led me on quite a chase." Noah moved slowly, positioning himself between Garrett and Delilah. "It's over, Garrett. The federal authorities have everything. Your empire is finished." Garrett's smile never reached his cold eyes. "Perhaps, but I'll have the satisfaction of settling personal accounts before I leave this world." He raised the revolver, aiming it squarely at Noah's chest. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you? That I would allow my brother's murderess to live happily ever after with her protector?" "Your brother was a predator who attacked an innocent woman," Noah replied, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at him. "Just like you're a predator who's attacked countless innocent families." "Innocent?" Garrett laughed harshly. "No one is innocent in this world, Quinn. Some are simply stronger than others. The weak exist to serve the strong. It's the natural order of things." While he spoke, Delilah had been slowly moving her hand beneath the counter, toward the loaded shotgun Noah kept there for protection. "Is that how you justified burning people out of their homes?" she asked, keeping Garrett's attention on her words rather than her movements. "Threatening women, killing those who stood in your way," Garrett's face twisted with contempt. "Save your moral indignation, Miss Blackburn." "I did what was necessary to build something lasting, something significant." "What have you ever built?" "A life," she replied simply. "With a good man, something you'll never understand." Garrett's finger tightened on the trigger. "Touching. You can die together then." Several things happened at once. Noah lunged forward as Delilah brought up the shotgun. Garrett fired, the bullet grazing Noah's shoulder as he tackled the older man. The shotgun blast went wide, shattering the front window of the store. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of Garrett's revolver. Despite his age, Marshall Garrett was surprisingly strong, driven by hatred and desperation. He managed to land a solid blow to Noah's wounded shoulder, causing him to momentarily lose his grip. Garrett scrambled backward, raising his gun again. "Noah!" Delilah cried, unable to get a clear shot with the shotgun without risking hitting Noah. The revolver pointed squarely at Noah's heart. Time seemed to slow as Garrett's finger moved to the trigger. Then, suddenly, his expression changed: confusion, then shock, then pain. He looked down at the knife protruding from his chest, Noah's knife, thrown with deadly accuracy. Garrett staggered, the gun dropping from his fingers. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only blood emerged. Then he collapsed, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. The silence that followed was deafening. Noah rose shakily to his feet, pressing a hand to his wounded shoulder. "Are you all right?" Delilah asked, rushing to his side. "I'll live," he replied grimly, glancing down at Garrett's body. "It's really over now." The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Town residents, drawn by the gunshot and breaking glass, gathered outside the store. The local sheriff, summoned by the commotion, took statements and sent for Marshal Cooper. By nightfall, the truth about Mr. and Mrs. Russell had spread throughout Cedar Creek not as condemnation, but as something approaching awe. "You stood against the Garretts," Mrs. Henderson said wonderingly as she brought food to them later that evening, when no one else dared. Marshal Cooper arrived the following day, officially confirming Garrett's death and the dismantling of his criminal organization. "The president himself has taken an interest in this case," he informed them. "There will be commendations and compensation for all you've lost. What happens now?" Delilah asked as they sat in the small parlor above the store, Noah's shoulder bandaged and healing. Cooper shrugged. "That's up to you. The charges against you for Victor Garrett's death have been dismissed clear self-defense. You're free to go wherever you wish, do whatever you please." After the marshal left, Noah and Delilah sat in companionable silence, processing all that had happened and all that might yet be. "I've been thinking," Noah said finally, taking her hand in his, "about what comes next. And what have you decided?" Delilah asked, her heart quickening at the serious expression on his face. "That I don't want to pretend anymore." He met her eyes directly. "I want to marry you, Delilah Blackburn, not as Russell but as Quinn, build something real together." Joy bloomed within her, bright and unexpected after so much darkness. "I'd like that very much, Noah Quinn." "I can't offer you much yet," he cautioned. "The compensation Cooper mentioned will help, but we'd be starting from scratch." Delilah smiled, squeezing his hand. "We've already started. This store, this town, it feels like home now, doesn't it?" Noah's eyes softened as he looked around the simple room that had sheltered them through the most dangerous time of their lives. "It does," he agreed, "though I still think about having land someday, horses, maybe even cattle." "Then that's what we'll work toward," Delilah said simply. "Together." Spring arrived in Cedar Creek with a riot of wildflowers and renewed hope. The small white church was filled to capacity as Noah Quinn and Delilah Blackburn exchanged vows, no longer pretending, no longer hiding. Among the guests was Marshal Cooper, who presented them with official documentation of their full pardon and compensation from the federal government. "Enough to buy a nice piece of land," Noah observed later as they examined the bank draft, "with a stream running through it. Good pasture for horses. And room for a house," Delilah added, leaning against his shoulder. "A real home." They found their land 500 acres of rolling hills and fertile valleys just outside of Cedar Creek. Noah began breeding horses, starting with the loyal chestnut that had carried them both to safety that first desperate day. Delilah continued running the store, expanding its inventory and clientele. Their home rose gradually, a solid, welcoming structure built with their own hands, and those of neighbors who had become friends. Each room represented a part of the future they were building together. From the large kitchen where Delilah experimented with recipes to the study, where Noah kept meticulous records of his growing horse operation. 2 years after Garrett's death, their daughter was born Margaret, named in memory of Evans's mother and the grave that had protected the truth for so long. She had Noah's blue eyes and Delilah's dark hair, a perfect blend of them both. Standing on their porch one evening, their daughter sleeping peacefully inside, Noah and Delilah watched the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. His arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, they contemplated how far they had come from that desperate moment behind an overturned wagon. "I've been thinking about what Garrett said that day in the store," Delilah said softly, "about building something lasting." Noah's arm tightened around her. "What about it?" He was wrong, you know. "What we've built this life, our family, it's more significant than all his power and wealth ever was." Noah turned to her, framing her face with gentle hands. The hardness that had once defined him had softened, tempered by love and peace. He never understood what truly matters, but we do. As twilight deepened around them, Delilah thought back to the words that had changed everything, her fearful warning, his defiant response. "He'll hunt us both down," she had said. "Then let him try," Noah had replied. He had tried, and failed, because some things were stronger than fear, more powerful than threats. Some things, like love and courage and truth, could withstand even the darkest storms. And in their aftermath, build something truly lasting.